Good afternoon. It is a great honor for Mark and myself to present our ideas on promoting health rather than treating disease, using our pigs as an example. We believe it is the duty of the veterinarian to look after the health of the animals that is under our care, not just look and fix the ones that are sick, but also to enhance the health and welfare and well-being of the majority of pigs, rather than just concentrating on the relatively small minority of pigs that would be compromised on a pig farm. So, for example, if we take this simple picture of a farrowing house, what do you actually see? Well, when you actually look at the pigs, what you actually see is diarrhea. You see piglet diarrhea. And so it would be a traditional that we would then look at taking swabs, taking samples, post-morteming any unfortunate pigs that have died, and then coming out to a conclusion that the problem was associated with Escherichia coli, E. coli, and diarrhea. We would then maybe look at the type of toxins and what type of fimbriae were there, and then modify the vaccine program, do an antibiogram, and work out what antibiotics the E. coli was sensitive to. But it's not the actual cause of the problem. The cause of the problem was cholesterol deficiency associated or caused by chilling. And we get a glimpse that this may be the problem because when we look at the farrowing cards, we see the farrowing cards are blowing in the wind. They're not static. There's too much air movement in this farrowing house, and it is this that's leading to a problem with cholesterol intake in the piglets. And it is that that is then allowing the piglets to succumb to the Escherichia coli, which was already there anyway, associated maybe with some inadequate cleaning or whatever. But the problem is not the E. coli specifically. The problem is the management of the building resulting in too much drafts, and presumably because the guys are trying to keep the sows cool in order to enhance their welfare. But at the same time, they then compromise the welfare of the piglets. So this presentation is going to talk about management issues that we as veterinarians can try and help our clients. Now, that's not saying that there's not real diseases. There are real diseases that, irrespective of the amount of management and good welfare, good care, there are some major pathogens of pigs that are very devastating. In this particular example here, we see PED, porcine epidemic diarrhea, a coronavirus, very nasty disease that when it affects pigs, particularly for the first time, enters a farm, it will kill 100% of the pigs that are less than 10 days of age, producing a profuse diarrhea, and those poor piglets have no chance of survival. Again, it is associated with colostrum in the sense that the colostrum does not provide adequate immunity. But these piglets will die irrespective of what you do. And it's interesting to note that the piglets that are slightly older have more of an innate immunity. They may well have diarrhea, but they may well survive. We have a major scourge of African swine fever on this planet at the moment, killing millions and millions of pigs worldwide, particularly in the northern hemisphere, but now also extending down into the southern hemisphere in the Philippines. The diagnosis can be a little bit difficult, but for example, here we see a sow that with profuse hemorrhage from every orifice, from its nose, from around the eyes, from the ears, in the feces, and also from the vulva. And then the weaners on the other side are acting most bizarrely. Some of them are very red, very high temperatures of 42, 43 degrees centigrade, high mortality. The piglets were very difficult to move. When they did move, they appeared to be lame. There may be some dysentery, blood in the feces. And when you post-mortem the pigs, there was a very large spleen and a hemorrhagic gallbladder. Again, this is African swine fever, a very, very serious disease. of which the best management in the world is likely to succumb. Although we are trying with African swine fever to resolve or stop the problem spreading through biosecurity. Fortunately, most of our problems on a day-to-day basis are more mundane. They are still very serious to our clients and fairly serious to our pigs. So, for example, here we have 2 growing pigs with quite profuse diarrhea. And this is ileitis associated with Lawsonia intercellularis. And this again is a serious pathogen, but is probably also associated with actually too clean a pig. And we've upset the metagenomics of the pig, and the gut biome, the microbes in the gut are not protecting the pig sufficiently and allowing the Lawsonia to then overwhelm the gut. So what we're going to look at are the 9 features that we look or we review every time we visit a farm. And these will be the pig flow, biosecurity medicines, water, food, floor, air, stock, and stock people. And the whole aim is to try and enhance the welfare and the well-being of the pigs under our care in order to maintain their health. And clearly, if we maintain the health of more and more pigs, then we will reduce the number of compromised pigs and vice versa, the number of pigs that will actually die. So the first part of this talk, we'll look at the first 3 components, biosecurity, pig flow, and medicine control. Biosecurity is a major component of the veterinarian's responsibility when they're on a farm. It is very important to look at the biosecurity, because if we can keep pathogens off the farm, then we clearly don't have to design preventive medicine programs in order to try and reduce their clinical signs or mitigate their clinical signs. However, the traditional biosecurity of on-farm and off-farm is proving to be a little ineffective against African swine fever. So this would be my traditional model, where we have a nice perimeter fence. So this is off-farm, and then this is on-farm. This still will work, but we are finding that the perimeter fence is not adequate on a lot of farms. And we've had to go to a 3-zone system instead of a 2-zone system, where we produce a physical air gap between the farm and the off-farm. So you now have the on-farm area, as we had before. You have the off-farm area, but the off-farm area is separated from the on-farm area by a gray zone. So there's an air gap between the farm and the outside world. Materials then have to cross that air gap, but that crossing of the air gap is accomplished by a secondary vehicle. This vehicle does not leave the gray zone. So for taking food, for an example, we have food being delivered now to feed bins on the perimeter of the farm. A farm dedicated feed truck will take the food from the perimeter feed bins over to the feed bins associated with the farm buildings. This truck doesn't actually enter the farm either, but it provides this gap. It provides this transport across this back gap. It transships. And likewise, pigs leaving and entering the farm, we have loading areas, so the pigs will load off the farm into a truck, drive round to the off-farm loading area, where they're then transported onto another truck and then transported away from the farm. This then removes the risk of transportation from off-farm facilities, because we're finding that far too many trucks are too unclean when they visit our farms. And certainly for the control of African swine fever and PED, porcine epidemic diarrhea, and then this 3-zone system is proving extremely effective. However, the problem with it is that it's very expensive. And clearly you need to be quite a large farm to be able to afford to have this sort of facilities. When we look at the UK, we are in quite a unique situation where an awful lot of our farm is outside. And this then provides almost no biosecurity when the only biosecurity we have is the hedge. And it is a particular nightmare that if African swine fever crossed the channel, our industry would be extremely vulnerable to the movement of African swine fever through feral and even escaped wild pigs. Pig flow. This is basically the mathematics of how a farm works. We need to make sure that the animals are in the right place at the right time and therefore given the right environment. The code of practice, the welfare code of practice, is an excellent resource that provides us with information on how we're supposed to farm our pigs, coupled with the European legislation, which provides for specific stocking rates for our pigs. Now, this means that we have to batch. We have to put the right number of pigs into the building, otherwise they're going to be overstocked or ultimately understocked, which then would cost the farmer money. One of the aims of the veterinarian, in order to maintain the health of the pigs, is to remove the variation within the system. And this is only possible with batching. So if we take this simple farm as an example, we have 16 batches of pigs, could be weekly, could be 3 weekly, depending on how the farm is designed. We'll say it's a weekly batch. So over 16 weeks, this is then the performance data. We see we have in week 1, 16 animals bred, 14 animals farrow, and we wean 168 pigs. Fantastic. When you look at the global picture, the farm is doing okay. The farrowing rate's a little on the low side, but the farrowing rate is okay, 83%. And the numbers weaned are spectacular, 12 plus. Very good. But when we look at the detail of how the farm is being worked, how the pigs are flowing through the system, it's chaos. 1 week we breed 16, another week we breed 8. You can't do this. The farm is designed to farrow 10 sows a week. The farm nursery is then designed for 120 pigs a week. 12 pigs times 10 farrowing places. And the numbers bred should be 12 or 13, depending on the time of the year, partly more in the summer, maybe slightly less in the winter. So this would be an ideal week. Batch number 2, ideal week. With batch number 1, where did we put the extra 48 pigs? We didn't have room for them in the nursery. So clearly we had to overstock. If you overstock, you tend to get more respiratory problems. Likewise, in week 3, we have insufficient pigs. With insufficient pigs, you tend to get more chilling. There may, particularly in the wintertime, there may not be enough pigs in actually to produce the adequate environment of the animals, particularly the air environment. The pigs are chilled, they tend to get more intestinal disorders, more diarrheas. Then if we look at week 7, we produce 160 pigs, 40 more than we need. But John, it doesn't matter, because in week 6, I'm short. So what I'll do is I'll move my pigs from week 7 to week 6. And while nobody's looking, nobody knows. And then when you get a PRRS break, porcine reproductive and respiratory disease outbreak, in normally batch 6, do you ask the question about how the batches were sorted out? The farmer may or may not tell you. In my experience, a lot of farmers are very embarrassed when they create the problem, and they don't really want you to find out. That's why you have to become part of the farm team, so that we have honesty and transparency in our data. Then on top of this, we have the parity profile of the farm. It's all part of the pig flow. If you have more parity 1 animals farrowing, gilts farrowing, you are more likely to have diarrhea in the farrowing house. Pigs born to a parity 1 sow have 3 times as much chance of dying before finishing than pigs born to a parity 3 sow. So if this week, for various reasons, you have a lot of parity 1 sows farrowing, you will have more diarrhea in the farrowing house. You will have more meningitis, Glasses disease in the nursery. You will have more enzootic pneumonia in the finishing unit. It's got nothing to do with the pathogens themselves. This is just the way that you, as part of the farm team, farmed the pigs. We as veterinary surgeons are privileged to be able to prescribe medicines and look after the medicines. But how many of us pay a lot of attention actually on the farm at how these medicines are used and abused by our clients? So in this particular case, the icebox cover has broken and the fridge is running very cold. Here's an example actually in Korea, where we had a persistent, intermittent diarrhea problem in our piglets. And this is associated with the fact that the E. coli vaccine is frozen, partially frozen. This one's frozen, this one's not. Frozen vaccines will not work. And in some respects can actually cause problems. In the top video, we see a refrigerator which is dirty and badly managed, with open needles, with bottles of medicines in the wrong place in the refrigerator. So for instance, in the vegetable area, it's too warm for vaccines, and yet he's placed the vaccines in the refrigerated area. This is truly appalling, and yet sadly it's still very common. When we go onto the farm, how are the staff using syringes, needles, bottles? Are the bottles clean? Are the bottle tops clean? Are the syringes clean? Are the syringes, all of this is part of our responsibility as veterinary surgeons in order to maintain the health of the pigs. We go back to the refrigerator. We have mainly 2 temperature stores. We have the cold store in the refrigerator. We have the warm store for the antibiotics. At what temperature are these areas being maintained? How do you monitor that temperature? How do you log that temperature? So here we use a temperature logger. The required zone is between 2 and 8. So here it's borderline warm, but then something horrible goes wrong with the refrigerator. This is probably a door opening event, but this area here is the refrigerator has gone badly wrong, and it is now freezing. Do you know this is what's happening on the refrigerators on your farms or not? We use in-feed medication, but do you understand the movement of materials through a feed bin adequately in order to make sure that when you medicate the pigs and we have a withdrawal period, that the withdrawal periods are actually adhered to? Putting clean food on the top of the feed and then starting the withdrawal period will not work, because the clean food will come straight through the medicated food. The medicated food will fall into the feed trough over the next few more days. And these can then lead to findings in the slaughterhouse where we have pigs with antibiotic residues, which is clearly something we just do not want, or is not acceptable. Likewise, with water medication, you've got to make sure that the system works. A classic mistake is occurring here, where we have a kink in the system, so that whenever the pigs are medicated with the water supply itself is limited. And therefore the success of the medication is below what expectations of the whole group. Another classic cause is that this piping here is a different diameter to the piping that provides around the rest of the house. And so every time you put the water medicator on, because the water has to flow through a narrower pipe, you're restricting the flow of water to the pigs. And therefore the pigs do not receive the medication that you have prescribed. So we've looked at the biosecurity, pig flow, and medicines. And all of these are reported when I do my report, all of these are reported as separate categories. We can now look at the main environment of the pigs. And so this would be for every area, the farrowing places, the breeding barn, the nursery, the finishing house. And we look at the four main components of the environment: the water, the food, the floor, and the air. This sow changed my life. Before I met this sow, I was very much trained in bugs and drugs. So my job was, as a veterinarian, to identify the cause of the compromised animal, the E. coli. I then isolated the E. coli. I then found an antibiogram. I then prescribed medication to treat said sick pig. Now, this sow has stereotypic behavior. What she's doing is nodding. She presses her nose on the drinker and then she nods down into the trough, and she did this for 45 minutes. But this is not stereotypic behavior. This is desperation. Here we see a sow, about 14 days of lactation, with 12 good, strong, healthy pigs. And she's desperately trying to keep her babies alive. She knows she has to obtain around 40 to 60, maybe even 80 liters of water a day. The drinker works. It's a nose drinker. It's working adequately. The flow rate was 2 liters a minute, so the flow is okay. It'll take her the required amount of time, but this is normal. The trouble that she has is that when she presses on the drinker, the water leaks out of the trough. This is not stereotypic behavior. This is learned behavior in the sense that she knows that when she presses on the drinker, she's then got to lick up the water that's available before the water runs out. And she's got to drink 60 liters a day this way. This is cruelty. Totally unacceptable. But how many of us really look? In this case here, which is just outside London, in this case here, what we have is a farmer that's complaining about the fact that she puts in pigs very, very evenly into the group. But what she can't understand is why the pigs are so variable 6 or 7 weeks later. And that's the specific reason why I was asked to go out. And what you say here is there's 70 pigs in this pen and 1 drinker. This is clearly breaking the welfare code. However, we still have to resolve the problem. What this pig is doing is this pig realizes that if it dominates the water supply, it can then eat. And if it eats, it becomes the biggest pig and then is not bullied by the other pigs. And so this pig doesn't actually want to drink. What this pig wants to do is to make sure that the other pigs don't drink. And if the other pigs don't drink, then they won't eat. And if they don't eat, they will not grow. And he will maintain his position as top pig. Water, food. Similar sort of things can happen with the food supply. How much food space is available? Where are the feeders placed? All these things are valuable contributions that veterinarians can do. Because the big thing that we are on a farm is that we see the wood for the trees. The farmers live on the farm. The stock people live on the farm. And they miss some of the nuances. But when a stranger comes, it's like, why are you doing that? And they just haven't thought about it. Or maybe they did think about it and then forgot because it got so routine. So if we look at this particular picture, there's multiple problems. We have a big pig dominating a feeder. Now, irrespective of what the pig is doing, There's way too much food in this feeder. So there's clearly an issue with feeder management, and there's waste food on the floor. Very expensive. The interesting thing about this particular pig, though, he's not right. He's got arthritis of his knee. He's a big pig. And a pig with a compromised leg would not normally be the biggest pig in the pen. This then tends to tell me that this pig here doesn't belong to these pigs. It's not out of the same batch. And so why has the pig been moved? Presumably because it was a smaller pig in a much larger, in a much older group. But he has moved into a group of pigs with all the pathogens of the other group. And therefore, what else is going on in this batch? Watching the behavior of pigs is fascinating, but it is something that most of us don't spend enough time, because we're busy people, looking at the behavior of our animals. And in this particular case, where pigs love food, in this particular case, what we have is a liquid feed system. And this behavior is fairly typical of a liquid feed system. So they're fed 6 to 7 times a day. And then as soon as the food hits the feeder, the pigs will then all line up. And the pigs know exactly what time of day it is. And interestingly, the pigs 2 or 3 pens down will ignore the feeders going around the house. And only when the pen next to them starts having food will they start queuing up for food. But these sort of systems can also be fantastic for a veterinary surgeon, because why is the pig sitting back? Why is the pig not eating? That is the pig we need to identify as a possible compromised pig. Food is very expensive, 65% of the cost of production. Here we see, I put this in the feed section, but here we see a biosecurity breach. So we're on the outside of the building and we have food spilt under the feed bin. This is very expensive, wasteful, but it also can be a major threat, pathogen threat. It could encourage wild pigs to come to your farm, African swine fever. It could encourage birds to come to your farm, which could be TGE, salmonella. It could encourage more rats and mice on your farm, which is more salmonella, leptospirosis. So this sort of thing must be stopped. And you stop it by reminding the farmer of the expense that he's spending, and then the potential pathogen issue. Food is 65% of the cost of production. The veterinary bill is around, say, 6%. About 12% of food is wasted. That's more than the vet bill on a farm. So when you go to your clients, you can actually be more effective in terms of cost control if you manage the feeders or help the farmers manage the feeders. So when I go to a farm, I check out every feeder as well as every pig, but I check every feeder and I limit and I remind the farmer about wastage and feeder management. Water, food, floor. What do you see? What we have here is a farrowing house. It's quite clean. There's electrolytes down on the floor. There's a diarrhea problem. Farmers are medicating, stop people are medicating the pigs for some diarrhea. He's saying that the sows are suckling and everything else. You're looking at the problem. Why are the pigs not sleeping on the heat mat? The reason they're not sleeping on the heat mat is because the heat mat is too hot. You see that they're lying in a circle around the heat mat. So these piglets are actually getting chilled because the heat mat is driving them off the heat mat. And you still got the light on. And using infrared technology, we can demonstrate this to our clients. 54 degrees. So with our infrared camera, we can take this picture and show that the floor is cold, running around 22 degrees. So the pigs are being chilled because they're having to sleep on the floor. By being chilled, they don't take enough colostrum. They don't utilize the colostrum adequately. They are under stress, and therefore that's why they end up with diarrhea. Very similar to our very first picture. What I did in this picture to try and make it clear to the farmer was I got him to take his shoes off and his socks off, and then he had to stand on the heat mat. And he stood there for about 10 seconds before he tried to jump off, in order to try and make him aware of just how hot the heat mat was. The ventilation system, the air, is a critical control point. And far too many of our farms, if we're going to put animals in buildings, far too many of our farms, the air system is not adequate. If you have a fan, environmentally controlled ventilation system, you must maintain that fan. It costs 25% more to run a dirty fan than a clean fan. Again, looking at the behavior of the pigs, you can see these pigs are not normal. These pigs are not happy. They're piling. Why are they cold? Why are they acting cold? And then why is the next pig pen not doing this? And this was associated with a downdraft. Now, in this particular building, what we have is a nursery. And here we have a nursery rate of 92%, as in it's an 8% mortality, which is way too high. I would normally try to make the nursery rate of around 88, 87, so 2 or 3% mortality. It's unfortunate that we have any mortality, but it is at the moment a fact that our normal targets would be 2 to 3%. The farm has a serious problem with Streptococcus suis type 2 meningitis. And we had tried multiple antibiotics, and the farm was even getting to the point where they were making an autogenous vaccine against the Streptococcus suis. And they invited us in to look at the environment. So we checked the floor space, which was adequate, checked the water supply, which was good, feeders were good. Then we put the smoke in to check the air. And what you notice is that the smoke, the cold smoke from outside, it's the cold air from outside, lands in the lying area, lands in the air, or the sleeping area, lands in the area the pigs are supposed to sleep. What we had noticed was that this area here had a lot of feces, and the pigs were then forced to sleep by the feeder and by the water supply, which is not normal. We then changed the ventilation system round so that the air now landed in the passageway, away from the pigs. The cold air was not then chilling the pigs. And almost as soon as we did this, the mortality rate in the nursery became normal. So instead of it being 8%, it went back to 2%. We still had Streptococcus meningitis as part of that 2%, but it wasn't 100%. It wasn't the major cause of the meningitis had been fixed. We had stopped people who were uncomfortable because they complained about air blowing in their face, which was another problem we had to resolve. We did have one building where we had moderate success, but it wasn't very good. The mortality could not really get below 5%. And so we did a more intensive investigation. And what we found in here, when we put the smoke in, is this light, or these lights, there was a series of these lights. This light was acting as a baffle, and it was actually dropping air still into the pen of pigs. And when we then changed the lighting to strip lighting and moved the air around the lighting, then again, we fixed the problem. So this was not a meningitis problem associated with Strep suis type 2. This was a maintenance of health failure. We did not farm the pigs with adequate care. They did not have good water, food, floor, and air. And when we made the environment correct, looked after the health of the pigs, then the pigs then sorted out the meningitis, the Strep suis type 2 themselves. They did not need the support of our antibiotics. So then let's end by looking at the pigs themselves and the people looking after them. And a major concern of the pigs themselves is that we look at the 2 or 3% who are compromised rather than 97% who are coping with the system and are farming adequately. But it is still very important. How are we looking after these compromised pigs? And I still want to encourage more and more effort to be spent on these compromised pigs. One advantage of batching, where we create bigger and bigger groups of pigs, is that you actually create more and more compromised pigs. Now, that might seem like not a sensible thing to do. But if you take a farm, 250 sow farm, family farm, 10 sows a week, and you have 2 compromised pigs a week, it's not really 2, 3. That's not really enough to create a pen. And so what happens is that these animals are put in with other pigs of various sizes because they physically can't have individual pens. If you did the same farm every 3 weeks, so now you have 30 pigs every 3 weeks, but now you have 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 compromised pigs. But now you have enough compromised pigs that the farmer will put a pen aside, create a microenvironment, and the management of these compromised pigs can be greatly enhanced. It's still very important to teach our clients about the clinical signs of disease. So here we see a pig with a rectal stricture, possibly from a rectal prolapse, possibly from salmonellosis, possibly from coughing, might have been nipped as it was defecating. But unfortunately, this pig cannot defecate properly. It is constipated. The large bowel, the spiral bowel of the pig can fill up with a large amount of feces. These pigs will still eat to a degree, but they will progressively waste away over a period of several weeks. There is no treatment for these animals, and therefore we need to euthanize them, but they need to be recognized as soon as possible. Pigs are extremely clever creatures, probably the cleverest creatures that we farm. And I spend a lot of time worrying about mental health issues. We've got to create an environment where our pigs are satisfied with their lot in life, that they do not have mental health issues and are not exhibiting vice. And so we spend a lot of time designing toys, changing toys, but the toys also have to be able to be biosecure. And it's sometimes difficult if you put in wood and you leave the wood from one batch to the next. That's not good from a biosecurity point of view. People. Pig farming is actually relatively easy. Pigs are great animals to deal with. And people are great people to deal with. But an awful lot of our job is trying to train and educate our staff, farm staff. We use the term doctor. Doctor means teacher, not healer. If you want to use the term doctor, we need to teach our clients how to look after their pigs, how to maintain the health of their pigs. Now, over the years, a teacher, I've probably been more of a big stick than a teacher. And more recently, what I've tried to become is more of a coach. But that means I've got to figure out where I want to take the farm. And then I've got to be able to take the team with me in terms of obtaining the good welfare of the pigs, the well-being of the pigs, and the well-being of the staff and the farm in order to create a profit. So therefore, it is the farm survives. When you examine the pigs, you can ask the pigs themselves. Pigs should love us. They should at least like us. And I give the pigs 20 seconds in order to come up. They're naturally very curious creatures. And in 20 seconds, they should come up and they should say hello, and they should find out who I am and what I'm doing. And yet a lot of pigs are very wary of us. This is taking too long for these pigs to come and say hello. If you compare this with another farm, this is much more the behavior that I want to see. Pigs that are not stressed, pigs that want to say hello, pigs that are happy to be touched. If we look at these two videos, this is the same farm with the same stock person. Then with coaching, we were able to change his behavior and the pig's behavior. Notice that there is a circle around Stockman where the pigs will not enter. By changing and coaching the staff, we changed the whole enjoyment of the farm, where the pigs and the staff are much more content with each other. This is not necessarily about providing better performance. The farm did actually do better, but there was a whole range of other reasons why that would be true. The pigs, in some respects, are now more annoying because they are always in your face trying to work out what you're doing. And if you notice, we have altered the flow in the buildings a little bit, given the pigs a little bit more space to walk around. But to my mind, this is what one of the components we should be doing, is coaching our clients in order to make our pigs more content. This is probably a little bit extreme, but at the end of the day, it's a privilege to farm. It's a privilege to work with animals. That's why we became veterinarians in the first place. And there is no reason for animals to dislike us, no reason for us to dislike animals. I'm a food animal veterinarian. I'm a production animal veterinarian. I produce high quality British bacon, British pork, in order to keep our kids healthy, in order to keep people healthy. Pork is the #1 food on this planet. Very important that we as veterinarians help produce this excellent food supply, but in a way where the pigs also have some life within their farm. So in end, we work with our clients. It is a partnership, and it is a privilege to work with our animals. I look at animals as a member of staff. They're no different from us. As I said, I'm encouraging people to be a coach rather than be a teacher or a big stick. And at the end of the day, as Churchill said, pigs treat us as equals anyway. I mean, dogs look up to us and cats look down to us, but pigs will look us in the eye. And we'll end from a quote from George Orwell, Animal Farm, where the creatures looked from pig to man, and from man to pig, and from pig to man again. But already it was impossible to say which was which. Thank you very much.